Hello, folks. Welcome back to Market Junkies. This time, we're going to take a look at AMC. By the close, you're going to be equipped from a fundamental perspective with the knowledge to determine whether the stock is a buy, hold, or sell at current levels. So let's get into it. Who are AMC? They're a global theatre brand. They've got around 950 theatres globally. Now, the recent price movement, as we are all aware, has been insane. It's been hotly contested for the last 12 months due to its role in the squeezing of a number of short sellers, forcing these institutions to cover their positions at a massive loss. It's been great to watch. Now, for the last 12 months, it's up around 300%. Brilliant return for anyone buying then. However, it's 70% down from highs of $62. Currently is sitting at around an $18 share price and a market cap of around about 9 billion. Now, ownership activity is also pretty interesting here. So, according to Nasdaq, institutions own 31.35% of the stock. Now, institutions have actually been increasing their positions over the last 12 months. So the inflows are at 2.4 billion and the outflows of the last 12 months are 456.15 million. However, according to MarketBeat, the management or the insiders have been doing the exact opposite. Let me run you through a few of the poignant quarters. So in Q1 of this year, so 2022, we currently know that 12 million of stocks been sold by insiders and zero has been bought. In Q4, 48 million was sold and zero was bought. There was little activity in Q3, Q2 of last year, which I'm not going to mention. And then in Q1 of 2021, insiders sold 598 million, purchasing zero. Clear theme. Accept that. That is fact. Now, in reference to the analyst coverage, given the losses that retail impaired on a number of institutions, I don't really know whether to consider any of the coverage legitimate, to be perfectly frank. That said, nine are covering. They're all weighted towards the downside with an average price target of $10.45. But again, let me reiterate, can we think that is actual legitimate coverage? I don't know. Public float, 500,000,000 shares, and the outstanding is similar. So the industry as a whole, and I'll be honest, I was really surprised by this. I was expecting to see figures of a damning nation in which cinema is dead. That is not the case. So rise of digital consumption, of course, has affected cinema. So in 2022, 14% of adults said, hey, look, I'd love to see a movie first time in a theatre. 36% said they'd actually prefer to stream the film at home in the first instance. Compare that to 2018, okay, where 28% preferred cinema and 15% preferred streaming from home. So digital consumption of the youth is obviously something that's embedded within that culture. And I think as we edge further and further into the 2020s, there's going to be even more of a shift to paradigm of doing things online, doing things from home. And you're seeing that even with the work from home policies. It's remaining in culture today. Of course, the pandemic forced closures. Due to COVID, box office revenue in the US plummeted by 4/5 year on year in 2020 to 2.1 billion. In March of 2021, a year on from the start of the pandemic, nearly a quarter of cinemas were still closed. Box office revenue is set, however, to recover from this point at a rate of 37.3% over the next 5 years, which is really interesting. And with that, 100 in total cinemas in the US were forced to close, which is a sad times, right? But this is what really interests me. And there's a PwC study who are estimating a really strong resurgence post COVID in cinema goers, right? And I'll be honest, I've even been twice actually, and because it was something I wasn't able to do for so long. Now, the expectations are that by 2025, pre pandemic revenues will be exceeded, which is fantastic. Fantastic, right? To hear that about cinema. They're expecting a 28% growth rate from now until 2025. And I'm kind of baffled by that, but it kind of proves that although culture is shifting and people are preferring to stream, it's not massively affecting cinema and the magic still remains, albeit the industry is not growing year over year. No more so than 3% a year. It might even be lower than that. Now let's look at the positioning today. So AMC are a market leader, very strong market leader. They own Odeon is their European brand, and AMC obviously the the American piece, they operate 596 domestic theatres, 351 internationally. And this is what's really interesting. They went through a period of strategic acquisitions. So their screens today are around 10,500. That's compared to in July 2020, they had 8,043 screens. So they've improved or increased their leadership or their market share, I should say. And they did this because in the industry, some were getting closed, right, during the pandemic. And they've come in and stepped up their strategic acquisitions piece, which I'm really impressed by because I thought they would go on the back foot, but they've actually come on the offensive. They've got two new locations, which are actually ranking in the top 10 theaters in the box office of the last sort of year. And they're ranking in the top 30 in the United States consistently, which is really cool. And that's the Americana brand, which is got 18 screens, and AMC The Grove, which has got 14 screens. They've also got four former Pacific and ArcLight locations in 2021. So they've really made steps to further increase their position in the market, which is really cool. And this is quite interesting. They've got a popcorn entry. So the US is obviously the largest market for convenience foods. And this is quite encouraging, right? They've recognized that risks are so vast and there's so many in a brick and mortar only operation where you require footfall. And COVID's obviously changed the mindset internally. And get this, the average profit margin for popcorn is between 80 and 90%. It's brilliant market. So AMC initially plans to launch up to 5 AMC theaters. They're called AMC theaters Perfectly Popcorn. Sorry, that's the product, but they're launching as stores or counters in shopping malls in the first half of this year, and they want 15 by the end of the year, which is pretty decent acquisitions goals or growth goals, I should say. They're also looking at home delivery, and they're working on store bought packs that you can microwave. Now, the popcorn industry generally is a rate of growth of 10% from 2021 to 2028. And today, it's worth 2.3 billion. It's a bloody good market to be in. I kind of really rate this pivot because they're already going to be producing their own anyway. So cool. Now I want to talk about their market understanding. Look, retail saved them. It's that simple. And they're kind of paying them back with this NFT entry. You know, you had 86,000 NFTs for the Spider-Man No Way Home launch. That was alongside Sony. And they've also, I guess this was the start, right? But what this is going to lead to is a profit split with really popular film production crews or film production launches that are coming. It's given that this is going to happen. I don't know about the pricing structure, but again, it's quite a nice pivot. This, I just think, is a complete piss take, though. I own AMC NFT. Are they? I just, it's crazy. They're really feeding into that cult like retail holding now. And I don't really like it. It's not really for me. Focus on delivering revenue and focus on delivering sufficient streams without taking the piss out of your ownership as you continue. But look, it will lead to more revenue streams. Obviously, royalties to AMC every time something's resold, airdrops and discounts or other benefits are received to holders. I don't really like that. I think alongside the film side, it's quite a cool, compelling message. But doing it to holders, I don't like that. And then, of course, the Spider-Man boost, right? So they came within 1.5% of their all-time single-day record, which was set by Avengers Endgame in 2019. That kind of proves, right, cinema is not dead. The problem that you do have with the rise of the likes of Netflix and Prime and other streaming sites is not all films go to cinema. That's the issue that we've got. Okay, so management. We've got Adam Aarons, who's been the CEO since 2015. Previously, he was the CEO of Starwood Hotel and Resorts, and before that, he was actually the chairman and chief executive officer of World Leisure Partners. This guy has sold a lot of his shares. I'm not a massive fan of him based on that activity, but we move on. We've got Stephen Colmero. Prior to joining AMC, he was actually the vice president of marketing for Radio Shack back in 2008. And he is the chief marketing officer here. We've got Liz Frank, heads up worldwide programming and chief content officer. Very important role. Previously, the corporate strategic planner for Time Warner. She was previously actually a partner at McKinsey. Really like McKinsey. I use their reports in a fair few of the industry specific focuses for my videos. Got John McDonald down the bottom there, US Ops lead, very key. Director of American Multi Cinemas prior to coming on board. Yeah, really key man, I think, to drive footfall and revenues for the chains. We've got Jennifer Douglas, head of food and drink. I assume she's leading the popcorn charge. She's been with the organization 33 years, which I'm quite excited to see where the popcorn goes. And then we have Mark Pearson, who is the well, he's managing actually the digital transformation of the business and the strategy, right? Which is he's going to be a key figurehead, particularly in modernizing. He was previously vice president and head of strategy of 20th Century Fox and then Universal beforehand. So lots of cinema-based experience. Haven't really seen what he's done from a digital perspective. So if anybody's got further insights on him, please do send that across. One thing I will mention here, I keep seeing a lot of chatter around, hey, look, they're bringing on loads of developers from the likes of Microsoft. That isn't true. I've looked on LinkedIn, and look, it could well be that a lot of these developer types don't use LinkedIn. However, they do tend to when they're in the big technology firms. But I'm only finding sort of one or two, and they're not from big technologists. It's like, yeah, mid tier, I would argue. So don't feed into that. If you are, just have a little look for yourself, and you'll be able to see where these individuals are coming from. And all I could find was a team of like 5 or 6 that would fit that mold, that DevOps kind of mold. So I'm going to be interested to see if, firstly, anyone's got any further insight on that, and secondly, how this develops. So the figures, I'm going to keep it really simple here and just focus on Q3. So revenue rose to 763.2 million, and that is up and topped actually their analyst expectations, but it's up from 119.5 million the same period the last year, which is brilliant. They're on the mend. Food and beverage sales surged to 265.2 million. That is up from just 29.1 million year over year, which is crazy. All cinemas are now as good as open, which is brilliant to see. 40 million guests in Q3, which is bloody good, I must say, and that's up from 22 million in the second quarter. That's thanks to new blockbuster titles that they are pinning, I guess, that success to, which is a blessing and a curse, right? It's fantastic because it can support the footfall, but equally, if there isn't any big blockbusters coming out, the cinema's screwed. Operating costs are a 908.4 million. They actually exceeding revenues currently, which is also expected. And net loss is is 224 million, and that is actually compared with a loss of 905 million for the same period a year ago. So massive improvement there. 1.8 billion in liquidity. Now that includes cash and undrawn revolving credit lines. They're not anticipating using this or any credit for the next 12 months, according to this earnings call. So, real quick outlook and catalyst to look forward to. Pre COVID revenues and pre COVID life, let's say, could well return. Further strategic acquisitions. They've said that they're in talks for a number of other sites. So, that's quite interesting. The popcorn release is genuinely what I'm interested in. I think this could be quite a nice little stream of revenue for them. High profit margins, massively growing industry, easy one for them to pivot into as well. New hit releases, although that is dependent on the studios, of course. And I think the rise of digital media has certainly reduced the amount of hotly anticipated films that we see each year. The NFT expansion, I don't know whether they're going to be able to achieve this properly. I really don't. I don't see how, but equally, it could be oversights on my part. And then, of course, if something was to negatively impact them, it could well be a COVID sort of outbreak in certain regions or countrywide again, but let's hope not, hey. So, final thoughts. Look, the stock was heavily shorted because it was reliant on footfall primarily, right? And it was so cool seeing retail absolutely kill Wall Street for once. I must say, right, the stock actually is in reasonable health considering the pandemic. I wasn't aware that the industry itself appears pretty safe. That's from a number of independent research papers that by 2025, pre pandemic revs should return. But what it did do is force innovation upon them with both popcorn and NFT positioning. I quite like that. I think they've learned their lesson almost. Look, institutions have certainly been buying, which is great to see. The management for me here are a massive red flag. I don't see any innovators. The CFO and CEO dumped substantial amount of shares very recently. There's an NFT focus targeting shareholders, which in my opinion is scummy. And remember, right, so this is the timeline. July 7th, they said they wouldn't seek shareholder approval to issue new shares. And then on December 10th, as COVID cases are rising again in the US, the CFO and CEO dump. It just isn't a good look to me. I just don't like that at all. They obviously lead, they've acquired strategically really well. And I think having those two in the top 10 box office performance in top 30 is fantastic. The popcorn entry is cool. Profit margins 80%, 10% growth through to 2028. They're going to do well in that, I must say. And then you have the NFT piece, which is interesting to say the least. I don't really know how they're going to execute. Financials, I expect it to be so much worse. 1.8 in liquidity, but they're not going to be leveraging it. And I think stability is key now. Operation costs probably need monitoring. For me, it just isn't my type of stock. I prefer growth stocks. Technology backed growth stocks is kind of where I sit. And I think due to the rise of digital, you're not really going to get that growth here. I think those looking or awaiting some sort of squeeze, you're going to be here an awful long time. I understand if you want to hold a steady stock and you believe that the actual fundamentals of the business can propel it forward, but from a perspective of where they are today and what I see, if I was holding a much above this, I'd probably be selling. But for me, I wouldn't go near this stock. But look, I've been Market Junkies. I hope you've enjoyed the session. If you do have further insight, or maybe I've got a few things wrong, you can contact me on my socials below. And I look forward to having you in next time. Bye bye.